Today we're going to go take a look at the dialog system for 7 Days to Die, show you how a trader is connected to the dialog system, and explain a little bit about what makes up a dialog and explain the different lines in it. To start off with, we're going to look in entity classes.xml, and we're going to look at Trader Jen here. We know that she's a trader and she has an NPC ID of Trader Jen. This is just a string value. This value is referenced over the npc.xml. This maps back to her. And inside this is basically different settings for the NPC. They're almost all the same right now. But the one we're going to look at today right now is the dialog ID, which is trader. This references the dialogs.xml, this ID here. So this is the main file we want to look at today. The dialog contains a series of statements and responses. Statements are what the NPC can say to you, and responses are what you can say back to the NPC. The dialog has a unique ID, as previously mentioned. It also has a start statement ID. This basically tells the game which statement do I start with. And this is your typical statement. It contains an ID and it contains a text. The text is right here is a localization entry key. So the game will look this up in the localization file, find it here, and it will return this string. Now the dialog system also has a fallback, so if it does not find the localization entry for this, it's going to print just this. So if you're doing any quick testing, you can type in your plain language right in the text field here. A statement contains a series of responses, but it's linked via response entry. So I'll explain that. So there's a response entry and it has an ID of shop. This ID points directly to a response node here. So it's going to take a look at the shop. It's going to look through all the responses to find the ID shop, and it's going to display this text in the dialog here. When the player selects this response, then it can trigger an action. In this case, for the shop, it's going to open up the trader window. The other thing about responses is they can have requirements. So if we take a look at the admin, and the response for the admin is down here. Again, this is the localization, and the next statement is something new. We haven't talked about that yet. This will take this, if you click on this response, it's going to take you to the next statement. But the difference here is that there's a requirement. There's a requirement that you need to be an admin. So in the game, that would be in your DM mode. So this response will not show up in the menu unless you're an admin. It says here requirement type hide. That's the only requirement type that the game has right now, and it determines whether the response is visible or not. So if you're not an admin, it's going to hide this response. You can have more than one requirement, and all has to be true in order for the response to show up. Once they're all true and the player clicks on the admin, it's going to take us to the next statement called admin. And that uses statement ID of admin, and that's a little bit confusing because the response IDs and statement IDs can be duplicates of each other. The system tells them apart. You wouldn't be able to have the same ID for statements in multiple times, or the same ID for responses multiple times. So under the statement for the admin, we're giving the option to restock, reset the quest, or never mind. And never mind takes you back to the main dialog chain here. It gets a little bit confusing when you start looking at whether the trader has any jobs. So when you're in game, you can say, do you have any jobs? But what's really happening is that for all the tiers of the quest, they're actually defined in the start. They're just gated by requirements. So the jobs we need to have a quest that's not started, and our highest unlocked tier is 1. And if that's true, then we will go to the current jobs 1. If that's not true, for example, let's say our highest tier quest is 2, we've unlocked tier 2, then it's going to go to this one. You won't see this anymore because the tier quest failed here. Under the current jobs for the statements, we see the 5 different quests that you can have. And this is more entries about whether or not you can pick the quest line or not. For the most part, people won't be really messing with the quest entries. What we're mostly focused about modding wise is having good conversations that lets the players see the traders as more involved into the world. Get the NPCs to have more specialized dialogue. So we want to go and find certain NPCs and talk to them because they'll have different stories. So this is going to conclude the tutorial for this dialogue. I'm going to create a couple more dialogues tutorials using the new tool that Seath and I have been working on, and hopefully that will make it a little bit easier for people to make these NPCs really pop out.